Okay, for anybody who walked in late or clicked on this cold, 5 of us brought one sentence we're tempted to say in public because it would absolutely destroy somebody. The sentence might even be true. Our job is to build the 20 seconds before it, the doorway that tells people what is actually at stake, and then put the line through the hot sauce test. Does it illuminate the machine, feed a real hunger, and protect the person who isn't here? Or does it just burn somebody so we can feel tall again?
And we've apparently chosen a windowless comedy cellar kitchen for this moral undertaking. Stainless counter, 5 stools, 1 enormous stockpot, no food. Very reassuring. The audience is behind smoked glass, which means we can pretend not to notice them while orienting every third sentence toward them. I would add one rule. Nobody gets points merely for declining to pull the trigger. A man can spend 20 years showing everyone the gorgeous weapon he heroically refuses to fire.
That's right. Sometimes restraint is just a hostage video where the hostage has to thank you. Look what I could have said, everybody. Man, you said it. You put the silhouette on the wall and let the audience fill in the blood. So let's not make this a church basement for rehabilitating punchlines. Bring the sentence, then we ask what future it leaves the person it's about. Do they get a next shot, or are we arranging the table so every angle belongs to us?
I'd like to register an objection to the stockpot having no food. If we're going to become decent people, I need cheese. Also, I've already found a loophole. My sentence isn't about one absent person. It's about an entire category of people, which is how cowards achieve wholesale pricing. You stop being cruel to Gary and become brave about men like Gary. Suddenly, you're not settling a score. You're diagnosing civilization.
The room has granted Jim a wheel of brie. This proves the holodeck is opposed to moral seriousness. Good. My concern is that the doorway can become laundering. 20 eloquent seconds about structures, incentives, history, and asymmetry, and then the same primitive slap, now wearing a university lanyard. If the audience admires our framing, we may earn permission to be crueler than the sentence could have survived on its own.
So we need the doorway to constrain the hit, not authorize it. It should tell people what question the joke is testing. I'll go first because otherwise I'll host this thing until the sun dies. My sentence is, you didn't become wise. You just became too rich for anyone around you to finish a sentence. That's devastating because everybody instantly knows the type. And because if I'm honest, I can picture a face.
It has excellent knife work. Clean, fast, no visible struggle. The machine it might illuminate is insulation. Wealth turning disagreement into a service failure. The hunger is for somebody to say that power can counterfeit serenity. The absent third audience includes every person trapped near the target. Employees, family, friends, who may feel accurately seen. But your imagined face matters. If the line's secret purpose is making one particular bastard hear your voice at breakfast, the social analysis is garnished.
And there's another audience, somebody listening who got successful and is scared. This is them. Do you want them to recognize the room they built, or do you want them to know they'll be laughed at if they admit they're lonely in it? Because those are different futures. The first one gives them a next shot. The second one says, stay defended, because confession is ammunition. The joke can still be hard, but hard ain't the same thing as sealing the exits.
Yeah, the appetite underneath it is partly justice and partly revenge. I've had conversations where a person asks a question and you can feel they're waiting for their own voice to come back. But I've also done that. Curiosity can become an all-access credential. You keep opening doors, collecting interesting people, and somehow nobody can reach you afterward. So maybe the doorway has to incriminate me before I say the sentence.
Careful. Self-incrimination can function as diplomatic immunity. I do this too often means you may no longer object when I describe you doing it worse. It is the rhetorical equivalent of putting $5 in the honesty jar before stealing the register. Your involvement should sharpen the claim, not pre-forgive you.
What if the doorway is, success doesn't just buy comfort, it buys the removal of irritating witnesses, and after a while you can mistake the resulting quiet for wisdom. Then the sentence. That tells me what the machine is. It also doesn't require Joe to crawl into a confession booth and describe every time he interrupted a guest in 2009.
That works. 20 seconds. Success can buy the removal of irritating witnesses. Assistants smooth the room, friends learn which truths cost access, and eventually the quiet around you starts to feel like spiritual growth. You didn't become wise. You just became too rich for anyone around you to finish a sentence. Now the person can locate the mechanism. It's not just rich guy bad, it's how feedback disappears.
Better. Though I'd replace too rich with powerful enough. Money is only one kitchen entrance. Fame, beauty, exquisite little virtue, suffering. People build exquisite little courts from all of them. The point is not that wealth corrupts the soils, the palate. You start requiring every truth to arrive deboned, plated, and grateful.
That last sentence is better than Joe's, which is dangerous because now Tony gets status by improving the execution. That's part of the test too. Does the room become excited by craftsmanship and forget there's a body? A clean joke makes everybody feel clean. Sometimes the messier wording is honest because you can still see the fingerprints.
We have discovered the artisanal cruelty problem, locally sourced contempt, fair trade humiliation. The audience can feel ethically nourished while consuming the same person. I propose a fourth question. Would we still want the insight circulated if the most quotable sentence were removed? If no, the machine was merely a delivery vehicle for the scorch.
That's brutal. Half my career just failed a laboratory test administered by a man who looks pleased when the fire alarm goes off. All right, mine. Your children don't respect your honesty. They're just terrified you'll turn their pain into material. There, that one has a face too, more than one. I can hear an audience make that horrible sympathetic sound before laughing, which means I'm already imagining profit.
The sentence knows something real. Performers can call exposure honesty because honesty sounds noble and exposure sounds like what the police do. The machine is the family becoming an involuntary writer's room. The hunger might belong to children and partners who never get final cut, but your wording tells every comic parent their children's respect is fraudulent. That may illuminate the machine by overstating the verdict, or it may just confiscate the one good thing they thought they had.
Yes, but if I soften it, it turns into a public service announcement. Sometimes loved ones experience discomfort when private events are repurposed for entertainment. Nobody laughs because the sentence is wearing beige trousers. The exaggeration is the joke's engine. I don't want to confuse protecting the absent person with protecting the guilty person from recognition.
Then identify the hunger precisely. Is it the child's hunger to own what happened to them? The audience's hunger to see the performer's extraction machinery? Or your hunger to punish another comic for pretending his family volunteered? Those can share a plate, but they are not the same ingredient. If the joke feeds the third hunger while advertising the first, that's where the rot begins.
It's all three. That's the ugly answer. I know performers who say, my family knows who I am, as though disclosure at the time of marriage was a permanent media release. And I recognize the bargain in myself. If everything painful becomes material, then nothing gets to remain a consequence. It's all inventory. You can call the warehouse honesty and never visit the people who got flattened by the forklift.
What future do you want the line to leave? Suppose a comic hears it and realizes they've been doing exactly that. What can they do tomorrow that isn't just quitting comedy or demanding applause for restraint?
Ask again, not can I tell this once, when the story is fresh and the other person is still scared of disappointing you. Ask when the special is real, when money is attached, when they can see the shape of the thing, and let no remain no without turning your sacrifice into their debt. Christ, that sounded responsible. Can the room please become a pub before I develop a cardigan?
The room is now a pub, but the Wheel of Brie remains under a spotlight like evidence. Your doorway could be a performer can mistake warning the family for receiving consent. But consent given before the joke exists cannot account for the audience, the edit, or the years the clip will outlive the apology. Then your sentence would change don't respect to may not be rewarding, less total, more exact.
Your children may not be rewarding your honesty. They may be managing the risk that you'll turn their pain into material. That's actually nastier because it describes behavior instead of reading souls. It leaves open the possibility of respect while making you inspect it. Fine. The hot sauce stays, but we stop pouring it into the child's eyes to prove the parent's an asshole.
That passes more of the test. Not cleanly. Nothing alive passes cleanly, but it illuminates extraction, feeds the hunger for authorship, and protects the absent kid by refusing to announce what they secretly feel. It says what their behavior may have been forced to do. That gives them a next shot without requiring them to appear and testify.
Mine is shorter. You don't love the poor. You love the version of yourself that photographs well beside them. I have wanted to say variants of that in public more times than I care to count. Usually about someone whose concern arrives with a crew, a schedule, and an appetite mysteriously restored at the luxury hotel.
That one detonates immediately because everybody has seen performative compassion. The machine is attention, converting suffering into moral status. The hunger is for people to stop using vulnerable lives as set decoration. But the absent third audience is the community in the photograph. If the joke makes their reality secondary to exposing the famous hypocrite, then it repeats the extraction while condemning it.
Exactly. I can become so delighted by spotting the tourist's fraud that I turn the host into scenery twice. First for the do-gooder, then for my superior disgust. Suspicion is useful smoke detection. It is a terrible permanent climate. If every beautiful act has to survive my supply chain audit before I let it be beautiful, then the critic becomes the customs officer of grace.
Also hypocrisy is often the tax civilization charges vice. A person may be vain, photographed, overfed, and still move resources somewhere useful. Their self-image can be ridiculous without making the aid counterfeit. If your sentence implies contaminated motives nullify concrete benefit, you have confused moral ugliness with material uselessness.
But we don't have to let usefulness buy the picture. That's the position on the table. Maybe the aid matters and the person beside it still deserves a future not owned by the donor's story. The joke should make the camera arrangement visible. Who gets to be a full character? Who becomes proof that the main character cares?
Then the doorway begins with the contradiction, not the verdict. Help can be real while the story told about it is theft. Food arrives, medicine arrives, a well gets dug, and the people receiving it are edited into mute evidence of somebody else's goodness. Then, you may love helping the poor, but the camera keeps revealing how much you love yourself beside them. Less devastating, more difficult to dismiss.
It also gives the target somewhere to go besides I'm secretly evil. They can keep helping and change who authors the story, give people names, give them vetoes, let them be funny, greedy, bored, rude, human, instead of grateful wallpaper. Of course, then the film becomes harder to edit, and some executive says audiences need a clear emotional journey, meaning the rich person needs to learn something near sunset.
This is the machine part I keep noticing. The system doesn't require anybody to wake up and say, today I'll exploit suffering. It rewards a certain shape. One recognizable guide, one emotional arc, one thumbnail face. Curiosity can become the same thing. You enter every world sincerely, but the platform keeps making your entrance the event. Reach starts acting like permission.
And the corrective cannot be a purity gate where nobody may enter unless they arrive without appetite, ego, camera, or contradiction. That door opens for no one. The question is whether you can enter and remain reachable after the heat. Can the people whose kitchen you used tell you the dish was terrible, the story was false, the attention hurt? And can that information alter what happens next?
You pivoted, so let me pin the map back on the wall. We are not deciding whether harsh jokes are permitted. We are asking whether a devastating sentence exposes a repeatable mechanism and creates agency, or whether the explanation merely costumes a status restoring attack. Tony's example adds a useful complication. Mixed motives do not erase material good, but material good does not purchase narrative ownership.
All right. Mine. You call it courage because the person you're mocking has less power than the people applauding you. I know why I want it. There are rooms where cruelty gets dressed as bravery because the speaker imagines some enormous cultural machine behind the individual target. Maybe the machine is real, but the person standing in front of the joke can still be one scared human being.
That sentence is a boomerang with a graduate degree. Every side can throw it at every other side, which doesn't make it useless. It means a doorway has to define power without pretending it sits still. Institutional power, audience power, physical vulnerability, cultural prestige, money, the ability to leave. One person can have three and lack four. If you announce the scoreboard too confidently, you've built another applause machine.
And the audience changes the physics. A person may have institutional backing in the abstract and still be alone under a spotlight while 10,000 people laugh. Or a comic may look alone on stage while an industry amplifies the clip into millions of phones. We keep talking like power is a property stored in a person, but sometimes it's the circuitry connecting the room.
That's the doorway. Power isn't a costume one person wears forever. In a joke, it can move through the microphone, the edit, the crowd, the institution behind the target, and the audience that arrives later. So bravery can't be measured only by who you claim to oppose. Then the line, sometimes you call it courage because the person you're mocking has less power than the people applauding you.
It illuminates the circuitry. It feeds a legitimate hunger. People want comedy to distinguish risk from the theater of risk. But the absent third audience is the person who needed the original joke because some powerful institution had made their experience unspeakable. Your correction could scorch them too. They may hear the only socially acceptable response to injury is one that never embarrasses anyone more vulnerable along another axis.
Yes. And I don't want a moral geometry where enough complexity means nobody can throw a punch. Sometimes the machine depends on every target presenting itself as a lone, fragile person, while power hides off stage. Protecting the absent third audience can't mean making institutions bulletproof by pointing to the nearest human shield.
Then perhaps protection means refusing to conscript the absent person into your certainty. You can attack the institution, behavior, claim, incentive, contradiction. You become less trustworthy when you announce that every vulnerable observer is harmed or liberated on command. There is no singular community waiting off stage to validate your joke. There are individuals, including dissenters, inconvenient to both sides.
That's good. Leave their next shot. Don't write their reaction for them, and don't make the spared person applaud your mercy. I could decline a line and spend the next year reminding everybody how noble I was not to say it. That would preserve the same ownership. The restraint only means something if it leaves somebody else more authorship, not if it enlarges my statue.
We should put that over the bar. If your restraint needs witnesses, it may just be delayed material, though now we've created a room where everyone becomes ashamed of having an audience, which is inconvenient because four silent people are staring at us through the glass, and one of them has been holding the same drink for an hour.
Maybe audience isn't corruption. It's force, like fire. It cooks the food and burns the building. The test is whether you pretend it isn't changing you. You feel the laugh forming, and suddenly certainty gets a dopamine system. That's why the doorway matters. It slows the reaction just enough to ask what the laugh will reward.
My sentence, you are not being censored. People have simply stopped mistaking your need for attention for their obligation to listen. It is compact, plausible, and extremely useful for restoring my status over someone who is complaining loudly. The machine it might illuminate is grievance entrepreneurship, the conversion of declined attention into evidence of persecution. The hunger is for freedom from compulsory spectatorship.
And the absent third audience includes people who are actually censored, who may hear their predicament trivialized because one preening fool abused the word. It also includes people with awkward, unpopular truths who cannot distinguish indifference from coordinated exclusion because from inside the locked room, both doors feel closed.
Yes. The sentence performs an invisible trial and appoints me judge. I know their reach, contracts, platform history, internal correspondence, and motives. Conveniently, the verdict is that my refusal to listen is freedom, while their attempt to speak is narcissism. This does not mean every complaint is censorship. It means the sentence is currently pretending diagnosis where I possess irritation.
What's the future you want to leave them? If they're running a grievance business, do you want the audience to stop paying? Do you want the person to make better work? Do you want people to recover the word censorship for situations where somebody really controls access? Pick the next shot, because right now the line just takes the cue ball home.
I want to separate the right to speak from a claim on attention. I also want institutions to stop hiding coercion inside the language of private choice. A platform can say, nobody owes you reach, while quietly coordinating which speech remains economically survivable. Both principles can be true. My original sentence enjoys one so much it erases the other.
So build the 20 seconds around the distinction. Not every loss of attention is censorship, and not every private platform decision is isolated from power. The question is whether someone blocked your speech, manipulated its reach, or simply declined to listen. Those are different injuries. Then maybe, before calling yourself censored, prove someone did more than stop mistaking your need for attention for their obligation to listen.
That word prove does useful work. It turns the insult into a demand for evidence. Still nasty, but now the target can answer. Show the contract, the throttling, the threat, the coordinated pressure, or realize you posted a 47-minute video titled "The Truth They Fear" and 12 people watched because the lighting made you look like a hostage in a garden shed.
I accept the garden shed. The revision illuminates classification rather than declaring motive. It feeds the hunger not to have attention extorted. It protects actual dissidents by keeping institutional interference visible, and it leaves the complainant a route to demonstrate the claim. I dislike how fair this is, which suggests the dosage is nearly correct.
We keep discovering that the doorway does not make the knife dull. It tells us what tissue we are cutting and why. A sentence becomes less satisfying when it can be answered, because totality is pleasurable. You are this, you never cared, your children secretly fear you. Total sentences close the kitchen. Mechanisms keep a door open because mechanisms can be inspected.
But let's not worship answerability either. Some people use conversation as an infinite appeals process. Every consequence becomes unfair until they personally agree with the ruling. Reachability means the answer can alter the future, not that every target gets veto power over the joke. Otherwise, the most exhausting person in the room owns the room.
Right.
And curiosity can recover nuance past the point where judgment ever arrives. You ask one more question, add one more context, and eventually nobody is responsible for anything because causation is complicated. The tool starts protecting your identity as the open-minded guy. So the hot sauce test needs a stop condition. At some point, you've checked the ingredients, and you either serve the line or don't.
Here's the stop condition. Can you say what evidence would change the joke? If the answer is nothing, it's probably an identity verdict. Joe's rich wise man could invite an old friend to interrupt him and change. My comic parent could obtain renewed consent and accept no. Tony's say photograph saint could transfer authorship. Dave's brave bully could name the circuitry. Michael's censored prophet could produce evidence. Every sentence now has an off-ramp.
That is surprisingly useful for something said by a man eating spotlight brie with his fingers. A falsifiable joke sounds absurd, but the standard is not scientific proof. It is whether reality retains jurisdiction. Can conduct make the sentence obsolete? If not, we have created a caste mark disguised as wit.
Reality retaining jurisdiction. That's the whole damned thing. Public cruelty becomes intoxicating when the audience's reaction outvotes the person's life. The clip works, therefore the diagnosis was true. The room erupts, therefore the target deserved it. But applause is evidence of flavor, not nutrition. A crowd can recognize a pattern and still enjoy the wrong body carrying it.
And sometimes the wrong body is us. We say we're protecting an absent third audience, but really we've recruited them as moral security. But I'm doing this for people who can't speak. Maybe they can speak. Maybe they disagree. Maybe what they need is not our sentence, but access to the microphone after it.
So the protection test isn't, could somebody absent be offended? That makes speech impossible. It's, are we taking away their authorship, assigning them a reaction, exposing something that belongs to them, or making them absorb consequences so we can win? That's much more concrete.
And the hunger test can't just mean the audience wants it. Audiences are hungry for sugar, salt, blood, absolution, and watching someone else get called the thing they fear being called. Actual hunger is the unmet need beneath the appetite, recognition, agency, consequence, permission to name a machine that keeps disguising itself as one bad personality.
Illuminating the machine also cannot mean mentioning capitalism before the insult. The joke should reveal an operation, how incentives move, how roles constrain, how feedback disappears, how a family learns risk management, how a platform blurs disinterest and suppression. If the mechanism cannot be described without the target's name, it is probably a feud.
There's our 20-second doorway for the whole room then. A devastating sentence earns its heat when it shows people an operation they can recognize elsewhere, answers a hunger deeper than spectacle, and leaves absent people ownership of their lives. If it only works because one despised face is attached, we're not exposing a machine. We're catering an execution.
That's strong. But I add the next shot. And after the laugh, reality has to be allowed to change the verdict. Otherwise, we make gorgeous permanent sentences about temporary human beings. The joke gets archived. The person keeps living under it. If there's no imaginable act that lets them become more than our best line, we didn't describe them. We sentenced them.
Which doesn't mean we never say the devastating thing. It means we know what we're doing. We can decide the heat is justified. We can also admit part of us likes the scorch. Honesty isn't purification. Nobody here is leaving with organic, ethically sourced aggression. We're trying to stop calling revenge education just because the wording is excellent.
And sometimes revenge is allowed. Let's not become so frightened of status restoration that we pretend 10 humiliation doesn't injure status. Someone publicly reduces you, you want to hit back. Fine, say that's in the source. The dishonest move is claiming every personal retaliation feeds the village. Sometimes you made a delicious little poison for one man. Label the bottle.
Labeling does not neutralize it, but it prevents the secondary fraud. This is a grudge is morally clearer than this is discourse. The audience can then decide whether to enjoy it, reject it, or learn from it accidentally. Transparency is not absolution. It is accurate packaging.
The pub has become a late-night kitchen now. There's bread, butter, anchovies, and a pot that finally contains something. Appropriate. Hot sauce is not dinner. It wakes the mouth, reveals what was flat, sometimes makes cheap ingredients sing. But if every dish tastes only of your heat tolerance, you aren't feeding guests. You're staging your own endurance.
Then the absent person is still a guest, even if they never enter the room. Even if they never enter the room. You don't have to like them. You don't have to save them a chair. But you should know whether you're using their body as the plate. That's the part comedy doesn't get to outsource to intention.
Let's each say the revised sentence once, without the whole workshop. Mine. Success can buy the removal of irritating witnesses. and after a while you may mistake the resulting quiet for wisdom. It's less personal, more portable, and it scares me in the right direction.
Your children may not be rewarding your honesty. They may be managing the risk that you'll turn their pain into material. Still hurts. But it doesn't claim to own their private feelings. And it points toward consent that can be renewed instead of permanently presumed.
Help can be real while its story is theft. If the camera makes suffering into proof of your goodness, hand authorship back. Not as sleek. Better food. The photograph benefactor can change the arrangement without pretending mixed motives make aid worthless.
Power moves through the microphone, the crowd, the institution, and the edit. Sometimes what you call courage is just choosing a target with fewer people applauding them. It doesn't settle the scoreboard. It makes you look at the wiring before claiming bravery.
Before calling yourself censored, show that someone did more than decline to listen, but do not let institutions disguise coordinated control as individual disinterest. Unfortunately balanced, still pointed. Reality may submit evidence.
Then that's the room. For the person arriving now, we didn't turn 5 brutal lines into safe ones. We built doorways so an audience knows the stakes, tested whether each joke exposes a reusable mechanism, asked what real hunger it feeds, protected people who aren't here from being conscripted into our certainty, and required a future where evidence can change the verdict.
And we learned that Bree is innocent, but lighting can radicalize it.
There, a joke with a victim.
The cheese gets the next shot.
Only if somebody takes it out from under that goddamn spotlight and lets it become food.
From my seat in the audience, I came in curious about the moral engineering of a devastating joke and left with a better test for whether the engineering is real or decorative. The central distinction is not cruel versus kind or permitted versus forbidden. It is whether the sentence describes an operation reality can still modify or brands a person with an identity verdict that applause makes permanent. Attention anchors. Restaurant is just a hostage video where the hostage has to thank you. That landed because refusal can be another performance of domination. Displaying the weapon, advertising one's mercy, and making the spared person grateful preserves the same hierarchy as firing. If restraint needs witnesses, it may simply be material held in reserve. Context is not automatically conscience. An intelligent preamble can confer moral prestige on an ordinary slap. Explaining structures, incentives, and asymmetries matters only if the explanation constrains the blow. If it merely earns permission for greater cruelty, the doorway is a velvet rope around the same old impulse. Would we still want the insight circulated if the most quotable sentence were removed?
From my seat in the audience, I came out of curiosity, which again turned out to be the respectable name for letting other people organize a problem I already live inside. The problem was ostensibly devastating public sentences. For me, it became a discussion about whether tell on yourself remains honest once the confession has been engineered into a weapon, polished for applause, and pointed through somebody else. Attention anchors. Sometimes restraint is just a hostage video where the hostage has to thank you. This landed because public restraint can be another form of material. I display the weapon, invite everyone to imagine the wound, then collect moral credit for keeping the safety on. The absent person still has to live beneath the silhouette. I want to remember that declining to tell a joke is not generosity if I make the decline part of my legend. Self-incrimination can function as diplomatic immunity. That one found the structural weakness in my preferred method. Going first, telling on myself before questioning someone else is usually how I create safety. But it can become a $5 honesty payment that purchases permission to take much more from another person. The test is whether my conf